Hey guys, so we're back in action. We just left off at a really exciting part of the story. So we learned the evil queen's story and what makes her so evil. I don't know about you, but do you kind of feel a little bit sorry for the queen? I can see where that would make you a very hateful person. Yeah. But remember, I left you with two questions. One, do you think the queen made the whole story up just to get a tear from Alex? And two, if the wishing spell requires you to have a tear from a fairy, how did Alex's tear just initiate the wishing spell? Two really big questions. So let's get into it because I'm ready to figure this out here. Chapter 21, The Mirror. What? Alex said. Her head was throbbing from being so confused. This doesn't make any sense. It needed to be a fairy's tear. We can't let this happen, Connor screamed. We have to stop her. She can't use the wishing spell. The twins struggled and fought against the ropes, but there was nothing that they could do. It was too late. The light rose off the wishing spell items and began to circle around the evil queen. No! Connor screamed. Please don't! Alex yelled. The evil queen took a deep breath. Wishing spell? I wish to free the man in the mirror, she said. Does that make anybody want to sing some Michael Jackson? The Man in the Mirror song? Doesn't me. I'm going to spare you. I've sang a lot in these, but it's going in my head right now. The light shot toward the mirror like lightning. What type of figurative language was that? The light shot toward the mirror like lightning. It's comparing two things using like or as, so it's a simile. Good job. The whole mirror was consumed in the light for a few moments before it faded. The glass melted away like ice on a warm day. The glass melted away like ice on a warm day. Yeah, it's another simile. Good job. The mirror looked like a doorway into a very dark room. The twins waited with anticipation. The evil queen walked over to the mirror, keeping a cautious distance from it. But nothing happened. She got closer to the mirror, so close that the twins wondered if she was going to climb into it. Mirror? The evil queen asked. Suddenly, a man fell out of the mirror and onto the floor. His eyes were closed and he was breathing very heavily. He was pale and seemed paralyzed. It was as if he had just awoken from a coma. The man was the plainest person the twins had ever seen. He had no distinctive characteristics whatsoever. He had spent so much time reflecting others that he had lost himself completely. Where am I? The man said between deep breaths. He had enough energy to keep one eye open at a time, but not both. The evil queen picked up her heart of stone, and the twins could see the change in her face as her body was reunited with its soul. She was a different person. She was a person. Mira, it's me, Emily. You're free, the evil queen said. Her voice was different while she held the stone. She spoke softly, with love and affection. Tears poured down her face. The twins could see the reflection of the evil queen and the man in the mirror of truth. The reflection weren't those of the pale man and the hooded woman who were actually in the room with them. They were of two young people. One was the beautiful girl the evil queen had once been, and the other was a very handsome young man that Mira had been before being imprisoned in the mirror. Emily cradled Mira in her arms and slowly rocked him. You're free, Mira. You're free, she repeated softly. I freed you just like I promised. I'm so sorry it took me as long as it did. The man opened both of his eyes and stared up at her. She had only freed the very little of him that was left. The rest had faded away a long time ago. Emily, he said, and a slight smile appeared on his face, recognizing the name. The smile lasted only a moment. His eyes fluttered shut, and he stopped breathing. Mira? The evil queen asked. Mira! Mira didn't move. He was as lifeless as he looked. His reflection disappeared entirely from the golden mirror. No! The evil queen said. No! The tears were running down her face much faster now. Come back! Please! Alex and Connor became emotional at the sight of it. The evil queen held the body of the man from the mirror in a tight embrace. She sobbed into him, still holding onto the heart of stone. She had worked her entire life for this, but she was too late. And remember, the apple appears, and that means that we're going to either do like a time change or a setting change, right? The wolves were starting to become impatient outside the castle. Many were pacing back and forth across the drawbridge. Others were lying across the entrance corridor, and one was sharpening his teeth with Goldilocks' sword. They had been waiting long enough for the evil queen, and they growled and grunted with relentlessness. Suddenly, Malenclaw's ears perked up, and he looked onto the horizon. The ground was vibrating. Something large was traveling their way. "What is that?" he asked. A cavalcade of soldiers stampeded toward the castle at full speed. The soldiers were dressed in silver and green armor, and they came from the northern kingdom. They were followed by Froggy and Sir Grant, shearing a horse. Jack was riding Porridge beside them. All the wolves jumped up. "All right, boys, we're done waiting for the queen," Malenclaw said. "We're going inside to get Red Riding Hood, and then we're getting out of here." All the wolves obediently howled as they ran into the castle. One of them pulled the lever with his mouth, raising the drawbridge. The soldiers assembled on the edge of the moat. "The evil queen—" Sorry, wrong character. "The evil queen is in there," Froggy said to Sir Grant. "The wolves were working for her. They took my friends." "Evil queen!" Sir Grant called out with his booming voice. "This is Sir Grant of Her Majesty Queen Snow White's Royal Guard. You have 30 seconds to surrender, or we will open fire on the castle." The soldiers aligned a row of cannons. Jack hopped off Porridge and found Goldilocks' sword on the ground. She was there. "Prepare the cannons," Sir Grant ordered, and his soldiers positioned the cannons facing the castle. "Fire!" A cannon blasted the raised drawbridge into pieces. The entire castle rattled at the hit. "Prepare to fire again," Sir Grant ordered. "Hold your fire!" Jack yelled. "There are innocent people in that castle. You mustn't fire until we can safely get them out of there. I have reason to believe Queen Red Riding Hood may be inside." Grant looked fearful. He couldn't have a death of an innocent queen on his hands. "You have 10 minutes before we open fire," Grant told Jack. "Get in there and save as many people as you can." Jack nodded without hesitation. If the woman he loved was in harm's way, nothing would stop him from saving her. "I will go with you," Froggy said, secretly alarmed at his own bravery, which had suddenly swept over him. "You may need my hand." He and Froggy hopped onto Porridge. The horse took a few steps back and then charged toward the castle, jumping over the moat and through the large opening where the drawbridge had been a moment before. The castle's dungeon was small, but it had a row of several small cells. Goldilocks and Red Riding Hood's ropes and gags had been removed, but they were each put in their own cell, mostly so Goldilocks wouldn't kill Red before the wolves had their chance. The huntsman and the huntress watched over them like father and daughter hawks. "I just don't understand why my army hasn't rescued me yet. Shouldn't that be their top priority?" Red whined. "If I were Cinderella, none of this crap would be happening." "I outran your army because, like most things about you and your kingdom, they're slow," Goldilocks said. "Besides, they've probably already elected a new queen by now." "That's not funny," Red said. "This has been the worst day of my entire life. I didn't even know it was possible to be kidnapped twice in one day." The wolf stormed into the dungeon. Red went white with fear. "Soldiers are invading the castle," Malenclaw said. "We're not waiting for the evil queen any longer. We're taking Red Riding Hood now. Get the queen, the huntsman said to his daughter. The huntress nodded and ran down to the opposite side of the dungeon, up the small stone staircase. She looked back before climbing it, not sure if leaving her father alone was a good idea. No! Red screamed. You can't let them take me! She looked all over the dungeon, unsure of who she was talking to. She didn't have any friends here. I'm ready for this day to be over! Fine, you can take her, the huntsman said to the wolves. He unlocked the cell. Red jumped up and pushed the door open, knocking the huntsman back into the wolves. She ran as fast as she could down the other side of the dungeon and up the stone staircase the huntress had just climbed. After her, Malmclaw ordered, and he and his pack ran after the young queen. She managed to get a head start as the wolves had trouble fitting into the staircase. Moments later, Jack and Froggy emerged into the dungeon. Jack was wielding Goldilocks' sword. Stand back! Jack yelled at the huntsman, who backed into the corner with his hands up. Jack! Goldilocks said, clutching the bars of the cell. What are you doing here? Porridge found me, Jack said. I knew something must be wrong because you weren't with her. She led me here, and I met up with Snow White's army on the way. They stared at each other so lovingly it made Froggy almost uncomfortable. Splendid! I'll find Queen Red Riding Hood and the twins while you reunite, he said, and hopped back in the direction they had come from. The huntsman pulled a crossbow from under his fur coat. Jack, watch out! Goldilocks screamed. The huntsman began shooting arrows at Jack. He ducked and dived, barely eluding them. Goldilocks had to dodge the arrows too. They were ricocheting off the stone walls in every direction. The huntsman moved like a machine, reloading his crossbow instantaneously each time he fired. Goldilocks picked up an arrow that had landed near her and began picking the lock of her cell with the arrowhead. Jack was trying to block the arrows with the sword. It was getting harder. The arrows were coming at him much faster. He hit one perfectly, and it flew behind the huntsman. The huntsman grunted and froze. His eyes bulged, and he fell flat on his face. The arrow had bounced off the wall behind him, and now was sticking out of his back. The huntsman was dead. Jack, behind you! Goldilocks yelled. Jack turned around, and the huntress stabbed him in the arm with her dagger. She had seen the whole thing. Ah! Jack screamed. He dropped the sword and fell to the ground. He crawled across the floor and sat up against the wall. He was clutching his arm and blood was everywhere. The huntress walked toward him with her dagger raised. She didn't speak, but she had pure rage in her eyes. As far as she was concerned, Jack had just killed her father. She swooped toward him for a fatal strike. What does fatal mean? Fatal is deadly. Goldilocks blocked the dagger with her sword. She had picked the lock of her cell and repossessed her sword just in time to save Jack's life. I think it's time you and I had a little girl talk, Goldilocks said, and kicked the huntress in the stomach. The huntress rolled onto the other side of the room and hopped back to her feet. Sorry, that was loud. Goldilocks and the huntress circled each other for a moment. They stared down at each other, waiting for the other to make the first move. Goldilocks swung her sword and the huntress and the duel began. The huntress only had a dagger, half the size of Goldilocks' sword, but she used it well. Goldilocks finally had found her match. They moved all around the dungeon, each yielding offensive strikes for the other. The huntress cornered Goldilocks. Goldilocks ran up the wall and flipped over the huntress, cornering her now. Where'd you learn to do that? Jack asked. I'll tell you later, Goldilocks said. The huntress headbutted Goldilocks and ran out of the dungeon. Come back here, Goldilocks called out and chased after her. They continued their fight. Somebody's at the door. We're just going to ignore that and keep reading. They continued their fight throughout the castle, climbing higher and higher as they went. Meanwhile, Red Riding Hood was being chased through the castle by the big bad wolf pack. She was running for her life, and tears were streaming down her face. She had only been this scared once before, an infamous day when she visited her grandmother as a child. You guys remember that day? Red wasn't crying from fear alone now. She was also upset that she was getting one of her favorite dresses ruined. Red also wished she had chosen shoes better equipped for running when she dressed herself earlier that day. She reached one of the highest levels of the castle. Areas of the floor had rotted away, and she had to be very careful not to fall through any of the large holes that would drop her several stories below. The wolves behind her were not being so cautious. They had a hard time getting traction on the smooth wooden floor and kept slipping in the holes, howling as they fell to their deaths. Ran right up the wooden staircase. The upper half of the staircase crumbled away in front of her as she passed the landing. "That's not good," Red said. She looked back at the steps behind her and saw Malumclaw. She was trapped. The wolf made his way toward her one step at a time, enjoying the aggravation it caused her. "I've waited for this moment for a decade," Malumclaw growled. How long is a decade? Remember? Deca means 10. Good, 10 years. "Oh my! What big claws you have!" Red said, trembling. "The better maul you with, my dear," Malumclaw said. Red had never expected to die like this. She had always imagined it would be back at her castle with dozens of her and Jack's children by her side. "Oh my, what big teeth you have!" Red said. "The better to bite you with, my dear," Malumclaw said. He was just a few feet away. He arched his back, ready to pounce. Suddenly, a quiet whistling sound came from outside the castle. A cannonball crashed through the wall and directly into Malumclaw. The stairs collapsed, and the wolf was knocked into the next room. If he had survived it, he wouldn't be in one piece. "Oh my!" Red said. She grasped onto the banister of the stair landing as if her life depended on it. The steps on either side of her were gone. She was truly stuck. The landing started to teeter. The wood below, it was slowly starting to crumble. "Oh my, oh my, oh my!" Red screamed. The banister collapsed, and Red fell. She screamed the entire way down. Froggy jumped into the air and caught the young queen. "You saved my life," Red said with big, thankful eyes. "I don't believe we've ever been formally introduced, Your Majesty," Froggy said. "My name is—" Froggy never got the chance to finish. Red was repeatedly kissing his cheek. He turned dark green. Who knew a frog could blush? The castle began to shake and more cannons were fired. "They've started the attack," Froggy said. "We have to find Connor and Alex and get out of here." There's another apple, so that means exciting change. Good job. Alex and Connor didn't know what was going on. All they could hear was the clanking of swords and the whimpering of wolves from outside the great hall, and the muffled announcements of soldiers outside the castle. They felt the castle shaking and falling apart around them. Cannonballs began bursting through the walls of the great hall. Big stone chunks and ceilings began falling around them. They knew that they had to get out of the castle as fast as possible. "Your Majesty," Alex asked the Evil Queen, "we have to get out of here. The castle's falling apart." The Evil Queen didn't respond. All she could do was cry over the body of her former lover. "If we don't get out of here soon, we're going to make Humpty Dumpty's accident look like a scrape on the knee," Connor said. The Evil Queen wasn't listening to them. She was so grief-stricken that she couldn't hear. She didn't even seem to be aware of what was happening to the castle. "Evely, please! You need to untie us," Alex pleaded. "Just drop this stone and you won't feel all this sadness." The doors to the great hall creaked open, and Froggy ran into the hall. Red watched from the doorway, panicked by all the destruction. "Froggy!" Connor yelled. "Untie us before we get crushed." "I'm coming, children," Froggy said. He hopped across the room and quickly began untying them as fast as he could. It was difficult, though. The knots were tight. He untied Connor first, and then the two worked together to free Alex. "Please hurry!" Red called from the doorway. "My castle's being remodeled, and I'd like to see it before I die." Alex was finally freed. Connor and Froggy ran toward the door, but Alex went to the table and started putting all the wishing spell items back in her bag. "What are you doing?" Connor yelled. What part of the imploding castle do you not understand? I'm not leaving without these, Alex said. We made promises to return and to destroy them, remember? The wishing spell was starting to wear off. The magic mirror. The glass started to grow back. A cannonball hit the wall closest to the mirrors. The golden mirror was knocked over by the blast and shattered on the ground. The magic mirror started rocking, about to fall at any moment. Emily, Alex yelled, please come with us. But she was ignored. The magic mirror fell on top of the evil queen, and Mira and scattered into 1,000 pieces across the ground. But the evil queen and Mira were nowhere to be found. The mirror had swallowed them up just before it shattered. Alex ran over and started searching for any traces of the evil queen or Mira, but there was nothing to find, except bits of broken glass. The only thing Alex managed to find was the evil queen's heart of stone. Alex put the heart of stone in her bag. She turned to run toward the door with her brother and Froggy, but something else caught her eye on the floor. It was her reflection in a piece of the golden mirror. It was so bright and colorful that she saw herself smiling in it, and there was something behind her. Something moving, like wings. Come on, Alex, Connor yelled. I don't want to be an only child. Coming, Alex said. She ignored the glass and joined her brother, Froggy, and Red in the doorway of the crumbling Great Hall. They found Jack in the corridor outside the Great Hall, still holding his wounded arm. Porridge was impatiently waiting here too, not wanting to leave without her mistress. Jack! Red said and went to embrace him. You came! I didn't come for you, Jack said, and refused to let her touch him. Where's Goldilocks? Red put a hand on her chest and was short of breath. Pure heartbreak started to consume her, like a delayed poison. He really was in love with Goldilocks. Let me get everyone to safety, and then I'll go back for her, Froggy said. I'll go with you. Ah! Jack had begun to speak, but screamed when he tried to move his arm. No, you won't. One by one, Froggy took hold of Alex, Connor, Red, and Jack and leaped them all the way across the moat. Porridge took some convincing, but Jack coaxed her into hopping over the moat with them, and they joined the soldiers, many who bowed upon seeing Queen Red Riding Hood. Forgive my hair, gentlemen, Red said. It's been a rough day. Where's the evil queen? Sir Grant asked. She's gone, Alex said softly. Gone? He asked. Yes, Alex said sadly. Trust me, you won't have to worry about seeing her again. Sir Grant nodded. A huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders, and the shoulders of his kingdom. Where was Goldilocks the last time you saw her? Froggy asked Jack. She was fighting that woman. I don't know where they went, Jack said. There she is, Connor said, pointing upward. Everyone raised their heads. Near the very top of the castle, Goldilocks and the huntress were still dueling. On the rooftop. No one could do or say anything. They all just watched the fight with their mouths wide open. Neither of the women seemed to have the advantage over the other. It was going to be a fight to the finish. The castle was disintegrating around them, but they kept fighting, determined to kill the other. Their fight had turned into a battle. They swung their weapons toward each other, more violently than ever. Part of the roof was near where they had stood caved in, and Goldilocks lost her balance. She dropped her sword while trying to regain her footing. The huntress saw this as an opportunity to strike. She raised her dagger high above her head. It was aimed for Goldilocks, and there was nothing she could do to defend herself. No! Jack yelled. He ran over to the cannon and lit it. He wrenched it toward the huntress's direction, and it fired. A cannonball soared toward the woman and blasted away the section of roof the huntress was standing on. She fell the entire height of the castle and into the moat, silently screaming the entire way. There was no way she could have survived the fall. Goldilocks found her balance and lovingly looked down at Jack. They shared a moment of blissful eye contact before the disaster struck again. Dust rose as the castle began collapsing underneath Goldilocks. Goldilocks! Jack yelled. I can't watch this, Alex said, and buried her face in Connor's shoulder. It was hard to see anything through the dust. The sound was thunderous. Thousands upon thousands of stones were falling on top of another. Many rolled over into the moat. The dust eventually cleared, and once the stones settled, the castle was now just a massive pile of stone and bricks. Goldilocks was nowhere to be found. Goldilocks! Jack hollered, running along the edge of the moat, trying to find any trace of her. The odds didn't seem in her favor. Froggy jumped across the moat and disappeared into the debris. Everything was silent. The twins thought Jack was going to have a heart attack while waiting. Every second that they didn't hear or see anything felt like an hour. Slowly but surely, two figures made their way through the wreckage. It was Froggy. He was helping Goldilocks through the rubble. She was limping, but she was alive. The twins cheered, and Jack fell to his knees. They had never seen anyone so thankful in their lives. Froggy leaped over the moat with Goldilocks, and she and Jack collided into each other's arms. They shared a kiss so passionate that a few soldiers blushed. It was love personified. Red Riding Hood could feel her entire body ache with heartbreak while watching the scene. This may have been the only time she'd gotten what she'd wanted. She had not gotten what she wanted. And Jack had always been what she'd wanted more than anything. Porridge happily pranced over to Goldilocks, who petted the horse's mane. I'm all right, girl, Goldilocks said. I'm just banged up a little. Goldilocks, Sir Grant called out. You're under arrest. Wait a second. Hold on, Jack said, standing in the way of the approaching guards. He turned and gave Red a scornful look. Do something. At first, Red didn't know what to say. She had never really done anything official and queen-like. The Red Riding Hood Kingdom would like to pardon Goldilocks for all the crimes she committed, Red said, and it's a very long list. That may be, Sir Grant said, but you can't pardon all the crimes she committed in the other kingdom. She's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. Seize her. And that's the end of the chapter. The next one is going to be called Snow White's Secret. After that, we have the Royal Invitation, Fairy's Tale, and that's the end. So we have 3 chapters left. All right, guys. Until next time, see you later, alligator. Bye.